All right, we're going to talk about the autonomic nervous system. We've already learned quite a bit about the autonomic nervous system. It is a branch of the peripheral nervous system. It is divided into the sympathetic nervous system. Our sympathetic nervous system, I'm drawing it in red because it is known as our fight or flight. This is going to be when you're running for your life. This is going to be only on in times of stress. Now, sometimes people don't fight, sometimes people don't run, sometimes they freeze. That is something that happens when you talk about fight or flight. When you think of a deer and you're on the road and you're traveling and you're almost going to hit that deer, sometimes deer will stop in the middle of the road and you're like, why would you stop? I'm about to hit you. So sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. Sympathetic is in times of stress. So sympathetic is for stress, and it starts with an S. Now, the other system that we're going to be talking about in this chapter is the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system is only kicked on when you're relaxing. So this is also known as the rest and digest nervous system. Now, the way I always remembered this, parasympathetic sounds like a little pear. You know, if you've ever eaten a fruit that's a pear, it's got little dots on it. It's got a little, stem on it. So that's my pear for parasympathetic. So hopefully most of you are not stressing out with COVID. You're more in a parasympathetic nervous system response, resting, digesting, being at home. But more than likely with COVID, sympathetic nervous system is going to be fight or flight. Some people freeze, but this is in times of stress. So when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, you're either in one or the other and most times. So when we talk about functions of the autonomic nervous system, it is going to basically control your heart rate. So what happens when you're stressed out to your heart rate? Your heart rate's obviously going to speed. When you're resting and digesting, your heart rate will go up and down. So the heart rate, it controls the heart rate. Okay, the next thing is it's also going to control your blood pressure. So when you say blood pressure, what do you think happens when you're stressed out? Your blood pressure goes up, and when you're relaxing, it goes down. So it's going to control your digestive processes. Now, digestive processes are going to include things like salivation, digestion, defecation. Defecation's when you poop. It's also going to control your urinary processes. Urinary processes, urination. So our autonomic nervous system is going to be responsible for all of these things, because when we talk about the ANS, the effectors that these control smooth muscles. These are going to control glands, and it's going to control cardiac muscle, which is found in the heart. So when we talk about your heart rate, this is going to be cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is inside of the heart. Now, blood pressure is going to be because you have smooth muscles in your veins and arteries. You have smooth muscle and glands in your digestive process, and you have smooth muscle and glands in your urinary processes. So, these are the effectors that your autonomic nervous system controls, and that's how we are able to control or have all these functions. So, when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, the word autonomic means without conscious control. So, the effectors that we talk about with the autonomic nervous system, which are involuntary, are always going to be those three things: smooth muscles, which are in hollow organs. It's in the eyes. We're going to talk about the eyes. It's in blood vessels. It is in the uterus. Anything that's a hollow organ. Cardiac muscle is only in the heart. And glands. Glands are going to be salivary glands. When we say glands, we're going to talk about the lacrimal glands. The lacrimal glands are going to help you produce tears. Your salivary glands that we're going to talk about help you salivate. But we're also going to talk about sweat glands. Do you sweat more when you're stressed out or when you're resting and digesting? Well, to me, when you're nervous and you're stressed, you stress more. So our sweat glands, these are the glands that your autonomic nervous system are going to control. So when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, one thing is a little bit different with the safety pin cycle in the fact that we're going to have what we call ganglia. So we're going to have receptors that are located within the viscera, which is the organs. You're going to have your control center, which is going to have your CNS. Your ANS is going to be controlled by the brainstem and the hypothalamus. And then the third thing is our effectors. Now, one thing is going to be different with the autonomic nervous system. Now, there's a lot of things that are same. We're going to have sensory afferent neurons. In the autonomic nervous system. We're going to have interneurons, which are in the control center in your CNS. This is nothing new. However, for the autonomic nervous system, we're going to have a ganglia, which is known as the autonomic ganglia. So we're going to use two, basically, motor neurons. So this is called the preganglionic neuron, and then you're going to have the postganglionic neuron. So one new thing of the autonomic nervous system is we're going to have a ganglia called the autonomic ganglia. This right here is going to be called autonomic ganglia. A ganglia is a group of neuron cell bodies in the PNS, but these are going to send motor neurons to their effectors or their target organs. This is special for the ANS. the ANS is going to have an autonomic ganglia. So when we talk about this, we're going to call this the preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neuron. So pre-ganglia neuron, and we're going to have our postganglia, the one that's after that. This is special to the ANS. So when we talk about the preganglionic neuron and the postganglionic neuron, I'd like to draw this in actual terms of anatomy. So when we look at our preganglionic neuron, we're going to draw out the spinal cord. So let's see. We've already drawn the spinal cord several times. Okay, the foramen magnum is where it exits. It has the cervical region, the cervical enlargement, the thoracic region, and then it's got the lumbar enlargement. Whoops. And then it ends at the conus medullaris, which is the most inferior portion. Now, when we say ANS, the ANS is going to have, let me move this down a little bit. Pre-ganglionic neurons and post-ganglionic neurons. That is special to the ANS. Now, your first neuron, the cell body is going to start in the CNS. So I'm just going to use this cervical area, even though it's not really the region we're going to use, just to teach it. So you have your preganglionic neuron. So this is the cell body. This is the axon that comes off of it. And then this is the axon terminals. That is where it terminates. So we have this ganglion that it's going to terminate at. This is the autonomic ganglia. And then you're going to have a second neuron where cell body is going to communicate with the first one. And this one has an axon. And this is going to go out to its target organ. Now, its target organ could be the heart. It could be the blood vessel. It could be anything. So when we talk about the definitions of a preganglionic neuron and a postganglionic neuron, basically you should understand where the cell bodies originate. Again, this is the autonomic ganglion. The autonomic ganglia, which is special to the ANS. So, let's see. Pre-ganglionic neuron. Pre means before. So, I'm going to put a first and a second. This is the first neuron cell body. They reside in the CNS. When we say CNS, that's the spinal cord or the brain. Specifically, probably the brain stem. So your preganglionic neuron is literally the first neuron cell body. Now, your postganglionic neuron is the second neuron. The cell body is the circle. There's the cell body. It resides in the PNS, which is outside of the CNS. and it leads to our target cells. Now, your target cells are going to be smooth muscle, which you need to know their locations, cardiac muscle, which is in the heart, and different glands. So, when we talk about the autonomic nervous system, the very first thing that you need to understand is that there's going to be a preganglionic neuron versus a postganglionic neuron. That is special to the ANS. Now, I'm going to talk about the sympathetic nervous system versus the parasympathetic nervous system on the next video, so that you can know the differences between sympathetic and parasympathetic, because there's some key differences that you really need to realize.